All right, so we've got this stack of articles about the Moderna and Pfizer patent battle. And, on the surface, it's a story about COVID-19 vaccines. But it feels like something much bigger is at play here. It almost feels like a warning about the future of innovation in America. What do you think?
Yeah, it is pretty alarming when you see it all laid out like this. I mean, on one hand, we've got these pharmaceutical giants battling it out for billions of dollars in profits. And on the other hand, the very agency that's supposed to protect inventors is seemingly imploding.
Yeah, and speaking of imploding, Moderna just got hit with a pretty major setback. The Patent Trial and Appeal Board just ruled that 2 of their COVID-19 vaccine patents are invalid.
It's a huge blow to Moderna, especially because they were suing Pfizer and BioNTech for infringement on these exact patents. It's kind of wild that Pfizer and BioNTech were able to convince the PT that the core technology behind these patents was already known, before Moderna's claimed priority date of 2015.
So what does this mean for Moderna? Are they just throwing in the towel?
Not exactly. They've publicly said they respectfully disagree with the ruling, which is usually a pretty strong hint that an appeal is coming. Plus, their lawsuit against Pfizer over a third patent is still ongoing. So this fight is far from over.
It's fascinating how this is playing out on a global scale, too. Pfizer and BioNTech might have won this round in the U.S., but a German court just ruled that they did infringe on one of Moderna's European patents. So talk about a legal tug of war.
It's a real reminder that these international patent disputes are so incredibly complex, you can't just focus on winning in one country anymore. But stepping back for a second, the Moderna-Pfizer battle is just one small part of a much bigger issue. I mean, there are over a dozen lawsuits related to COVID-19 vaccine patents going on in the US right now, and even more internationally. It's like a global legal war zone with billions and billions of dollars in vaccine profits up for grabs.
It sounds like the Wild West out there. But there's also something else going on that has me really worried, and it's about the USPTO itself. What's the deal with all this internal turmoil?
Well, let's start with the basics. We have a hiring freeze at the USPTO, which is already causing delays and backlogs. And then there's this sudden and frankly baffling return to office mandate, which has people understandably up in arms. But the biggest red flag for me is this potential termination of probationary APJs. Those administrative patent judges that play such a crucial role in deciding these patent cases.
Wait, hold on. Why are they getting rid of judges? This doesn't make any sense.
It's a move that has the entire patent community scratching their heads. And the Bar Association, the group that represents patent attorneys, is especially concerned. They're arguing that these changes will essentially cripple the PP's ability to function. It's a recipe for disaster.
But the USPTO has always operated pretty efficiently. Didn't they pioneer telework decades ago?
Exactly. The PTAB Bar Association is pointing out that the USPTO has a long and very successful history of telework, even before the pandemic, made it a necessity. Their argument is that these changes are not only unnecessary, but they're going to actively harm American innovation. And they've laid out some pretty compelling reasons why.
Okay, I'm all ears. This is where it gets really concerning for me.
Well, their primary argument is that this is going to create a chilling effect on the patent process, making it much slower and more expensive for everyone, especially startups who rely on patents to secure funding. They're also really worried that this is going to gut the PTA trials, which are meant to offer a faster and cheaper alternative to these drawn-out court battles. And perhaps most alarmingly, they believe it's going to weaken protection against intellectual property theft, leaving individual inventors very vulnerable to these big corporations with incredibly deep pockets.
So it almost sounds like a deliberate attempt to stifle innovation and consolidate power in the hands of a select few.
It's hard not to see it that way. And to illustrate their point, they've highlighted the story of Molly Metz, an inventor whose jump rope patents were actually invalidated.
Wow. Okay, this is where it gets real. Let's hear more about Molly's experience. I mean, this is exactly the kind of story that helps us understand the human cost of these policy decisions.
Well, Molly poured her heart and soul into her company, Jump Rope. She developed this patented jump rope handle technology that was incredibly successful, but in 2021, the PT invalidated her patents in an IPR proceeding, basically a process that's meant to challenge the validity of existing patents.
So she lost her patents without ever even having her day in court.
That's right. Instead, it was decided by the PT, which often operates remotely. And in Molly's case, this remote hearing was an absolute nightmare.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What happened?
Well, she described how one of the PTAB judges had a barking dog interrupting the proceedings. It just highlighted this casual, almost disrespectful atmosphere of the whole thing. This was supposed to be a serious legal proceeding with years of her work and thousands of dollars on the line, and it was treated with a shocking lack of professionalism.
That is just unbelievable. You'd think they would at least mute their microphone. There's a dog barking in the
Well,
background.
it really undermines the integrity of the whole process. And after just an hour of deliberation, the PTAB wiped out a decade of Molly's work. Her business was decimated, she had to lay off employees, and she was left drowning in legal debt.
That's heartbreaking. And this is exactly what the PTAB Bar Association is warning us about. These changes are creating an environment where inventors are being denied due process and their livelihoods are being destroyed by a system that's supposed to be protecting them.
Molly's story perfectly encapsulates the human cost of these policy decisions. It's not just about abstract legal arguments or corporate profits. It's about real people whose lives are being upended by a system that seems to be failing them.
This is just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? There's more to this story that we need to uncover.
Definitely. And it involves something called discretionary denial, which is a practice the USPTO uses to dismiss patent challenges, and the rules around this have changed dramatically, creating a whole new level of uncertainty for inventors.
This is getting pretty dense, but I'm trying to follow along. Can you break this down for me?
Sure. In 2022, under the previous administration, the USPTO issued these guidelines that limited the PTAB's power to deny institution of these challenges based on parallel district court litigation. Basically, these guidelines were based on two legal precedents known as Fintiv and Sotera.
So these guidelines were supposed to give patent challengers a fairer shake, right?
Yes, you could say that. They were meant to prevent the PTO from simply dismissing a challenge because a similar case was already pending in federal court.
That sounds reasonable. So what happened?
Well, buckle up, because this is where it gets really crazy. Those guidelines have now been completely rescinded by the new administration.
Wait, what? They just threw them out the window? What does that even mean for patent challengers?
Honestly, it's a bit of a head-scratcher. It's still very early, and the implications aren't entirely clear yet, but what we can say for sure is that it likely gives patent owners more leverage in these disputes.
So it's like the pendulum has swung back in the other direction, making it even harder for anyone to challenge a patent.
That seems to be the case. We're in a period of intense flux in the patent world. We've got these high-stakes battles, constantly shifting policies and unpredictable rulings. All of this is creating a level of chaos that is incredibly detrimental to innovation.
It's enough to make your head spin. I can only imagine how frustrating and discouraging this must be for inventors who are just trying to protect their ideas and bring their creations to the world.
Yeah, it's a real kick in the teeth to anyone who believes in a fair and balanced patent system. And it's not just about patents and profits. This whole situation just feels like a symptom of a much deeper problem, a systemic attack on innovation itself.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, even this return to office mandate feels like a giant leap backwards. So many companies have embraced remote work and thrived, including the USPTO.
Well, the PTAB Bar Association actually points out that the USPTO has been a leader in telework for almost 30 years. They've proven that it works, and it benefits both employees and the agency itself.
So why this sudden and seemingly arbitrary push to get everyone back in the office? It just doesn't make sense.
It reeks of short-sightedness and a complete disregard for the facts. The USPTO is not funded by taxpayer dollars. They're self-funded through fees. Their telework program has saved them money and boosted productivity.
So what's the real motivation here? It feels like someone is trying to dismantle a system that was working perfectly fine.
Well, let's connect the dots here. Who benefits from a weakened PTAB, a slower patent process, and a system that's more vulnerable to abuse by big corporations? Certainly not individual inventors or startups.
You're right. This whole thing just stinks of corporate influence and a blatant disregard for the little guy.
And let's not forget about those probationary APJs, the patent judges. Many of them were hired with the understanding that they could work remotely. Forcing them back to the office could lead to a mass exodus of experienced judges, leaving the PTAB even more understaffed and vulnerable to outside pressure.
It's almost like they're deliberately trying to create a system that's easier to manipulate, and the people who will suffer the most are those who can least afford it. Independent inventors, small businesses, the very people who drive innovation in this country.
It's a classic case of the powerful exploiting the system to their advantage while everyone else gets left behind. And it has ripple effects that extend far beyond the patent world. When we stifle innovation at its source, we all pay the price. We end up with fewer new products, fewer groundbreaking technologies, fewer jobs. It's a bleak outlook.
I have to admit, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed by all of this. Is there anything we can do? It's easy to feel helpless when you're faced with such a massive systemic problem.
I understand that feeling, but I think the first step is awareness. We need to expose these issues, make sure people understand what's at stake, and start demanding better from our leaders.
So we need to raise our voices, make some noise, hold our elected officials accountable. But what about this whole discretionary denial mess? I mean, what can inventors do to protect themselves in this increasingly uncertain landscape? It feels like the rules of the game are constantly changing.
Unfortunately, you're right. It's a moving target. Right now, the best advice I can give is to seek out strong legal representation. You know, someone who deeply understands the intricacies of patent law and can navigate these murky waters.
So find a good lawyer and hope for the best. That's not exactly a comforting thought.
It's a tough reality, and honestly, it's hard to be optimistic when it feels like the system is rigged against innovation.
This all makes me wonder about the bigger picture. What does this mean for the future of American innovation? Are we headed for a creative dark age? Is this the end of the American dream?
Those are some heavy questions, and I don't have all the answers. But I do believe that even in the face of these challenges, the human spirit of invention will find a way to persevere. It always has.
That's a glimmer of hope, at least, but it sounds like you're saying it's going to be an uphill battle.
There's no doubt about that. The playing field is tilted against the little guy, and the odds are stacked against them. But as long as there are inventors out there who are passionate about their ideas and willing to fight for their rights, there's still reason to hope.
It's inspiring to hear that you haven't lost faith entirely, but I think you're right that faith needs to be coupled with action. We can't just hope for a better future. We need to demand it. We need to fight for a system that truly supports and protects innovation, not one that stifles it.
Exactly. We need to reclaim the narrative of innovation and make sure it benefits everyone, not just a select few. This isn't just about patents or profits, it's about the future of our country.
You've given us a lot to think about. This is a complex issue with far-reaching implications, and I think it's important to remember that we've been here before. We've faced seemingly insurmountable challenges in the past, and we've always found a way to overcome them.
That's a good point. We have a rich history of innovation in this country, and we can't let that legacy fade away. This isn't the time to give up or surrender to cynicism.
Exactly. We need to channel that spirit of innovation and use it to fight for a more just and equitable system. Remember what you said earlier about the USPTO's financial incentives? That's a conflict of interest that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
It's just plain wrong that the agency that's supposed to be protecting inventors is profiting from their struggles.
You're absolutely right. The fact that the USPTO charges thousands of dollars to obtain and maintain a patent and then thousands more to potentially cancel it through the PTAB is mind-boggling.
And to add insult to injury, if your patent is invalidated, you don't even get a refund. Where is the fairness in that? It's like a casino where the house always wins.
It's a blatant money grab, plain and simple. And it's particularly egregious when you consider that the PTAB has an extremely high invalidation rate. It creates this chilling effect on innovation. Why would anyone invest the time, the energy, the money into developing a new invention if they know there's a good chance that the USPTO will just snatch it away later?
It's disheartening to see how the very agency that's supposed to be protecting inventors is contributing to their demise.
Absolutely. It goes against the very principles of fairness and justice. And it's particularly damaging to smaller inventors and startups who often lack the resources to fight back against these challenges.
We need to shine a light on this injustice and demand reform. The current system is unsustainable and detrimental to the long-term health of our innovation ecosystem.
We need to remind our leaders that the patent system was created to promote progress, not to line the pockets of a bureaucratic agency.
This brings us back to Molly Metz and her jump rope company. It sounds like she was a victim of this broken system caught in the crosshairs of a bureaucratic machine that seems to have lost sight of its original purpose.
Based on what I read about her case, it seems highly likely that a jury would have upheld her patents. They were commercially successful, and there wasn't any clear evidence of obviousness. But the PTAB, operating under this deeply flawed system, decided otherwise with seemingly little regard for the devastating consequences.
It's a story that underscores the need for urgent reform. Countless inventors are being crushed by a system that's supposed to be supporting them.
It's a tragedy, and it's not an isolated incident. With these recent changes at the USPTO, it's only going to get worse. We risk losing an entire generation of American innovators who will either give up on the patent system altogether or take their ideas elsewhere to countries where their intellectual property rights are better protected.
That's a frightening thought. We've always prided ourselves on being a nation of innovators, a beacon of creativity and ingenuity, but we're squandering that legacy by clinging to a system that is broken and rigged against the very people who drive progress.
It's time for a wake-up call. We need comprehensive patent reform that addresses these fundamental flaws and creates a system that is truly fair, transparent, and accessible to all.
So what's the solution? Where do we go from here? It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the enormity of the challenge.
It's not going to be easy, but we need to start by demanding better from our elected officials. We need to push for legislation that reforms the PTAB to ensure fairness and impartiality, addresses the inherent conflict of interest in the USPTO's funding model, provides more support and resources for independent inventors and small businesses.
It's a tall order, but we can't afford to be complacent. The future of American innovation hangs in the balance.
We need to fight for a patent system that fosters creativity, not crushes it. And we need to hold our leaders accountable for creating a system that serves the needs of all inventors, not just the wealthy and well-connected.
It's a fight worth having. And it starts with raising awareness, having these conversations, and demanding better from those in power.
Absolutely. The future of American innovation depends on it.
This deep dive into patent battles and USPTO upheaval has revealed some troubling trends. What stood out to you? What aspects of this will you explore further? Remember, in a world where information is power, staying informed is our greatest defense.
Yeah, it feels like we're at this tipping point,
Yeah.
where on one hand you have these incredible advancements in technology like the mRNA vaccines that have saved countless lives. But on the other hand, the system that's supposed to nurture and protect these innovations is crumbling before our eyes.
It's a dangerous paradox. We're celebrating the achievements of these brilliant minds while simultaneously undermining the very foundation that made their success possible. We've talked about Molly Metz's story, but I'm starting to realize that she's just one of many casualties in this war on innovation.
Exactly. It's easy to get caught up in the high-profile legal battles, between pharmaceutical giants. But the real damage is often happening beneath the surface, in the labs and workshops of everyday inventors who are struggling to just get their ideas off the ground.
And the changes at the USPTO are only exacerbating this problem. It's like they're deliberately creating an environment that's hostile to innovation, especially for those who don't have the resources to fight back.
It's disheartening to see how short-sighted and self-serving these policies are. They prioritize bureaucratic efficiency over fostering creativity and ingenuity. It's a recipe for stagnation and decline.
So what's the solution? How do we turn this ship around? It feels like a monumental task.
It's not going to be easy, but we can't afford to give in to despair. We need to rally around a common goal of reforming the patent system and reclaiming the spirit of American innovation.
Where do we even begin?
We need to start by demanding accountability from our elected officials. We need to push for legislation that addresses the fundamental flaws in the system, like the PT's bias toward large corporations and the USPTO's perverse financial incentives.
We need a system that's designed to promote progress, not profit.
Exactly. We need to shift the focus back to where it belongs, supporting and rewarding the creativity and ingenuity of individual inventors.
So what specific actions can we take to make this happen?
First, we need to raise awareness about these issues. The more people understand the challenges facing inventors, the more pressure we can put on our leaders to enact meaningful reform.
We need to get the word out, make some noise.
We can also support organizations like the PTAB Bar Association that are fighting for a fairer and more balanced patent system.
And we can vote for candidates who prioritize innovation and support policies that empower inventors and entrepreneurs.
It's a multi-pronged approach. It requires education, advocacy, and political action, but it's a fight worth having. The future of American innovation depends on it.
So to our listeners out there, we urge you to stay informed, get involved, and fight for a system that supports the ingenuity and creativity that have always been the hallmarks of American progress.
Remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about the challenges facing innovators, the better equipped you'll be to advocate for change. Don't let this deep dive be the end of your journey. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep fighting for a future where innovation thrives.